The auctioneer's gavel cracked against the wooden podium like a gunshot, and 28-year-old Miranda Wilson felt her entire world collapse as she stood on the platform in the scorching Nevada sun, hands trembling at her sides while strange men assessed her like livestock on this day that should have been a celebration of her birth. "Gentlemen, we'll start the bidding at $50 for this fine specimen of womanhood," the auctioneer called out, his voice dripping with false joviality that made Miranda's stomach churn. "She can cook, clean, and I'm told she's quite educated for a woman. Speaks 3 languages and can do sums." The year was 1884, and Cherry Creek, Nevada, a small silver mining town nestled in the White Pine Mountains, had seen better days. The mines were playing out, and desperation had turned good men into vultures and bad men into monsters. Miranda had arrived in town 6 months ago with her father, a prospector who believed he could strike it rich in the remaining veins of silver. Instead, he had struck cholera, and 3 weeks ago, she had buried him on a hillside overlooking the town that had killed him. With no money to pay his debts, the creditors had come calling. The saloon owner, a cruel man named Vernon Sykes, held the largest claim against her father's estate. When Miranda could not produce the $300 owed, Sykes had declared that she would work off the debt in his establishment. When she refused, citing the obvious implications of such work, he had petitioned the local magistrate to have her auctioned to recover his losses. The magistrate, who owed Sykes substantial gambling debts, had readily agreed. Now here she stood, in the same blue calico dress she had worn to her father's funeral, her dark auburn hair pinned back in a simple bun, her green eyes scanning the crowd for any hint of mercy. There was none. The men gathered in the town square were a mixture of miners with dust-caked faces, ranch hands with sun-weathered skin, and a few businessmen in suits that had seen better days. "Do I hear 50?" the auctioneer called. "50," shouted a grizzled miner missing most of his teeth. "55." Countered another man, this one heavy-set with breath that Miranda could smell from the platform, thick with whiskey even at 2 in the afternoon. Her throat tightened. This could not be happening, not on her birthday. She was 28 years old today, and instead of celebrating with cake and candles as her mother had done before consumption took her when Miranda was just 16, she was being sold like a horse or a cow. $60. The bidding continued, each increase in price somehow making her feel both more valuable and more worthless simultaneously. $300. The voice cut through the crowd like a knife through butter, deep and steady, with an authority that commanded immediate attention. The crowd parted, and Miranda's eyes fell upon the speaker. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out a clean white shirt beneath a leather vest. Dark brown hair touched the collar of his shirt, and even from the platform, she could see his eyes were an unusual shade of blue, like the Nevada sky right before sunset. He was younger than most of the bidders, perhaps 30 at most, with a strong jaw covered in a few days' worth of stubble. A Colt revolver sat low on his hip, tied down in the manner of a man who knew how to use it. Most striking was his demeanor. Unlike the leering, calculating expressions of the other men, this stranger's face was set in grim determination, his jaw clenched as though he found the entire proceeding distasteful. The auctioneer stammered, clearly shocked. 300, you say? That's the exact amount of the debt, sir. Are you certain? I'm certain. The stranger's voice carried no doubt. And I'm certain that if anyone bids higher, I'll match it and add whatever's necessary to end this disgrace. Silence fell over the crowd. Several men who had been preparing to bid exchanged glances and thought better of it. The stranger's hand rested casually near his revolver, and something in his bearing, suggested he was not a man to be trifled with. Vernon Sykes pushed through the crowd, his heavy jowls quivering with indignation. "Now hold on just a minute. Who the hell are you to come into my town and start throwing around money and threats?" The stranger turned to face Sykes directly, and though he was not a particularly violent-looking man, something in his gaze made the saloon owner take an involuntary step backward. "My name is Daniel Parker. I own the Diamond P Ranch about 30 miles north of here, and this is not your town, Sykes. It belongs to all the people trying to make an honest living here, which from what I hear doesn't include you." Daniel's words were measured but carried the weight of absolute conviction. "Now, I've offered $300, which satisfies the debt. Unless someone else wants to bid, I suggest we conclude this travesty." The auctioneer looked to Sykes, who glared at Daniel with unconcealed hatred but ultimately nodded. No one else in the crowd seemed inclined to challenge this stranger who had ridden in like an avenging angel. "Sold," the gavel cracked down, "to Mr. Daniel Parker for $300. Miranda felt her knees weaken. She had gone from being a free woman to being sold to a complete stranger in the span of 30 minutes. As Daniel approached the platform to collect his purchase, she studied his face, trying to discern what fate awaited her. Would he be cruel? Would he expect her to warm his bed? Would she simply be trading one form of slavery for another? Daniel climbed the steps to the platform and held out his hand, not to grab her, but as an offer to help her down. "Madam," he said quietly, his voice softer now that he stood close. "I know you have no reason to trust me, but I give you my word that I mean you no harm." She took his hand because there was no alternative, feeling the calluses that spoke of hard work and the steadiness of his grip. Up close, she could see that his eyes held no malice, only a deep weariness and something that might have been anger, though not directed at her. "I need to settle accounts," Daniel said, releasing her hand as soon as she was safely on the ground. "Please wait by the bay horse there. That's Copper. He won't bite." Miranda nodded mutely and moved toward the magnificent horse tied to the hitching post. The animal regarded her with liquid brown eyes that seemed far more sympathetic than most of the humans in the square. She reached out tentatively and stroked his neck, finding comfort in the simple animal warmth. Behind her, she could hear Daniel's voice, cold and hard. "Here's your blood money, Sykes. $300, counted and accounted for. The debt is paid in full, and I want a signed document stating such." "Now see here," Sykes blustered. "There's the matter of interest and fees. There's the matter of you taking advantage of a woman in mourning," Daniel interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "There's the matter of you corrupting a magistrate to sell a human being against her will. There's the matter of common decency, which you seem to have none of. Now you can take this money and give me the paperwork, or I can ride to the territorial capital and have a conversation with the governor about the legality of debt slavery in Nevada territory." The threat hung in the air. Miranda glanced back to see Sykes's face turning purple, but ultimately he snatched the money and gestured to a clerk who scurried forward with papers. Daniel read through them carefully before signing, then folded his copy and placed it in his vest pocket. When he returned to Miranda, his expression softened slightly. "Are there belongings you need to collect? I have a small trunk at the boarding house," she said quietly, finding her voice for the first time since the ordeal began. "But Mrs. Henderson locked me out this morning when she heard about the auction. She said she wouldn't have a woman of questionable morals under her roof." Something flickered in Daniel's eyes, anger perhaps, but he kept his voice level. "We'll retrieve your trunk. Come on." He untied Copper and began walking toward the boarding house, leading the horse with Miranda walking beside him. She was acutely aware of the stares following them, the whispers starting up in their wake. In a town this small, by nightfall everyone would be speculating about what the rancher from Diamond P wanted with the auctioned woman. The boarding house was a two-story structure badly in need of paint. Daniel knocked firmly on the door, and Mrs. Henderson, a pinch-faced woman in her 50s, opened it with a suspicious glare that only deepened when she saw Miranda. "Mrs. Henderson, I'm Daniel Parker. I've paid Miss Wilson's father's debts and I'm here to collect her belongings." "The room rent hasn't been paid for this week, Mrs. Henderson said sharply. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he reached into his pocket and pulled out several coins. "How much?" $2. It was highway robbery for a week's rent in a town like Cherry Creek, and everyone knew it, but Daniel counted out the coins without argument. "The trunk, please." 15 minutes later, Miranda's trunk, containing all her worldly possessions, was secured behind Copper's saddle. Daniel swung up onto the horse with easy grace, then reached down. "Give me your hand. Put your foot on my boot and swing up behind me." Miranda hesitated. She had never ridden astride a horse, much less sitting behind a man. But what choice did she have? She took his hand and managed, somewhat awkwardly, to settle behind him on the horse. Daniel waited until she had grasped his waist before clicking his tongue and urging Copper forward. As they rode out of Cherry Creek, Miranda looked back once at the town that had brought her nothing but sorrow. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and dust swirled in the street where men were already dispersing. The entertainment of her humiliation concluded. She turned away and focused instead on the broad back of the man who had bought her, wondering what price she would ultimately pay for this rescue. They rode in silence for the first mile, leaving Cherry Creek behind as the trail wound through sagebrush and scattered juniper. The White Pine Mountains rose around them, their slopes dotted with the tailings of played-out mines. It was beautiful country in a harsh, unforgiving way, much like the life Miranda had come to know. Finally, Daniel spoke without turning his head. "I suppose you're wondering what I intend to do with you." "The thought had crossed my mind," Miranda replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fear thrumming through her veins. "I'm going to give you a choice, Miss Wilson. That's something you didn't have today, and it's something every person deserves." He paused, guiding Copper around a rocky outcrop. "My ranch is 30 miles north. I run cattle and horses, about 1,000 head of cattle and 30 horses. I have 5 men who work for me, all decent fellows. I have a housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, who is 60 years old and from Canton, China. Her husband worked the mines until they killed him, and now she keeps my house and cooks better meals than I deserve." Miranda listened, confused about where this explanation was leading. "When we get to the ranch, you'll have a room of your own in the main house. You can help Mrs. Chen if you like, or you can tend the vegetable garden, or you can learn ranch work if that interests you. You'll be fed, clothed, and safe. No man on my property will touch you without your permission, and that includes me. You have my word on that, and I don't give my word lightly." "And in exchange?" Miranda asked, because there was always an exchange. "In exchange, you stay until you figure out what you want to do next. Could be a week, could be a month, could be a year. When you're ready to leave, I'll give you wages for your work and enough money to get wherever you want to go." He paused. "Or there's another option." Miranda's heart began to pound. "Before we reach the ranch, we could stop in at Father Miguel's church. He's about 5 miles from here, tends to the ranchers and farmers in this area. We could get married, legal and proper." Miranda's breath caught. "Married? You don't even know me." "No, I don't," Daniel agreed. "But I know that in this territory, an unmarried woman is vulnerable. I know that Sykes has a long memory and might try to cause you trouble. As my wife, you'd have protection, legal standing and security. He finally turned his head slightly, though he couldn't look at her directly without stopping the horse. It would be a real marriage in the eyes of the law and the church, but only a marriage in truth if you wanted it to be. We could have separate rooms, separate lives under the same roof. You'd be free to pursue your own interests, and if you ever wanted to leave, I wouldn't stop you, though legally it would be more complicated. Why would you do this? Miranda asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why would you spend $300 on a stranger and then offer marriage? Daniel was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. 5 years ago, I had a sister. Her name was Caroline. She was 23, beautiful, smart, full of life. She worked as a teacher in a mining camp in California. When the school couldn't pay her wages, the mining company tried to force her to work in the saloon instead. She refused. They threatened to auction her to cover the school's debts. He paused, and Miranda could feel the tension in his body. Before anyone could help her, before I even knew there was trouble, she took her own life, jumped into the American River and let it take her. Oh God, Miranda breathed. I'm so sorry. I wasn't there for Caroline, Daniel continued, his voice tight. I didn't know she needed help until it was too late. When I heard about what was happening in Cherry Creek today, when one of my ranch hands mentioned it in passing as if it were just gossip, I knew I couldn't let it happen again. I couldn't save my sister, but I could save you. Tears pricked Miranda's eyes. This man, this stranger, had spent a fortune and offered her both freedom and protection because of a sister he had lost. It was the most extraordinary act of kindness she had ever encountered. I don't know what to say, she admitted. You don't have to say anything right now, Daniel replied. We have 5 miles before we reach Father Miguel's church. Think about it. Either choice you make, I'll stand by my word. You'll be safe and cared for. Miranda fell silent, her mind whirling. Marriage to a stranger seemed insane, but so did the entire day. And there was wisdom in Daniel's words. As an unmarried woman with no family and no resources, she was vulnerable. Sykes was not the type of man to forget a grudge, and there was nothing to stop him from causing her trouble in the future. But as Mrs. Daniel Parker, wife of a prosperous rancher, she would have the protection of his name and his standing in the community. More than that, there was something about Daniel himself that called to her. He had walked into that town square and put himself between her and harm without hesitation. He had given her choices when she had none. He had shared his pain with her, trusting her with the story of his sister. These were not the actions of a cruel man or one who sought to take advantage, and if she were honest with herself, there was more. When she had taken his hand on the platform, when she had looked into those blue eyes, she had felt something spark, some recognition that went beyond gratitude or relief. It was too soon to call it attraction, but it was something, a possibility that had not existed before today. The landscape changed as they rode, the harsh scrubland giving way to better watered country. They crossed a creek, and Miranda saw green grass growing along its banks, cottonwood trees providing shade. In the distance, she could see a small structure with a cross on top, humble but well-maintained. That's Father Miguel's church, Daniel said. What's your decision? Miranda took a deep breath. She could play it safe, go to the ranch as an employee and remain in limbo, always vulnerable. Or she could take a leap of faith, trust this man who had already proven himself trustworthy and build a new life from the ashes of the old. It's my birthday, she said suddenly. Daniel turned his head slightly, surprise in his voice. What, today? I turned 28 today. I was supposed to celebrate with a cake and candles, maybe read a new book, enjoy a nice meal. Instead, I was auctioned like property. She paused, gathering her courage. If I'm going to make a new start, I can't think of a better birthday gift to myself than choosing my own future instead of having it forced on me." "And what do you choose?" Daniel asked quietly. "I choose to stop at Father Miguel's church," Miranda said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I choose to marry you, Daniel Parker. I choose to be your wife in law and in name, and we'll figure out the rest as we go." She felt Daniel's sharp intake of breath, felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. "Are you certain?" "I'm certain that you're a good man who did an extraordinarily good thing today. I'm certain that I trust you more than I've trusted anyone since my father died. I'm certain that I want security and protection, but more than that, I want a partnership, a chance to build something instead of just surviving." She tightened her hold on his waist slightly. "So yes, I'm certain." Daniel nodded and urged Copper toward the church. As they approached, a man in simple priest's robes emerged, his brown face weathered by sun and time, his dark eyes kind. He had to be at least 60, with white threading through his black hair. "Daniel Parker," he called out in greeting, his accent carrying the music of Spanish. "It has been many months. What brings you to my church on this hot afternoon?" Daniel dismounted and helped Miranda down before responding. "Father Miguel, this is Miranda Wilson. We'd like you to marry us." Father Miguel's eyebrows rose. "Marry you? But I have not seen you courting anyone." "This is very sudden, no. It's a complicated situation, Father," Daniel said. "But we're both of age, both willing, and both in need of the church's blessing." The priest studied them both carefully, and Miranda felt his gaze pierce through to her soul. She met his eyes steadily, letting him see her determination. "This is not a decision made lightly?" Father Miguel asked. "No, Father," Miranda said. "It's a decision made quickly but not lightly." "And you are willing, Señorita? No one forces you." "I'm willing," Miranda confirmed. "Mr. Parker has shown me more respect and kindness in the last hour than I've received in months. I'm willing to become his wife." Father Miguel looked between them once more, then nodded slowly. "Very well. Come inside. I will need witnesses, though. Let me call for the Johnsons." They lived just over that hill. 20 minutes later, a weathered couple in their 50s stood in the small church as witnesses. Mr. Johnson was a cattle rancher, lean and taciturn, while his wife was a sturdy woman with kind eyes who had pressed a small bouquet of wildflowers into Miranda's hands the moment she understood what was happening. The church was simple, with rough wooden pews and a cross carved by hand hanging on the wall. Afternoon light streamed through the open windows, and the smell of sage drifted in on the breeze. It was nothing like the grand church wedding Miranda had sometimes imagined as a girl, but standing next to Daniel, holding the wildflowers, she felt a sense of rightness that surprised her. Father Miguel began the ceremony, speaking in both English and Spanish, his voice filling the small space with gravity and grace. Daniel's responses were firm and clear. When it came time for Miranda to speak, she looked up at him, this man who had changed her life in the space of an hour, and spoke her vows with absolute sincerity. "You have a ring?" Father Miguel asked Daniel. Daniel's face fell. "I didn't think." "I came to Cherry Creek on business. I didn't plan here," Mrs. Johnson said, stepping forward. She worked a simple gold band off her own finger. "It was my mother's. I'd be honored if you'd use it until you can get one of your own." Daniel took the ring with obvious gratitude. "Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. I'll return it as soon as—" "Keep it," the woman interrupted, smiling. "My mother would have loved knowing it went to a couple starting their lives together." The ring was a little loose on Miranda's finger, but when Daniel slipped it on, she felt the weight of it like an anchor, grounding her in this new reality. She was married, to a stranger, on her birthday. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Father Miguel said, beaming. You may kiss your bride, Daniel. Daniel looked at Miranda, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, and he leaned down, pressing his lips to hers in a kiss that was chaste but warm, lasting only a moment but leaving her slightly breathless. "Congratulations, Mrs. Johnson cried, embracing Miranda warmly. "Welcome to the territory, Mrs. Parker, Mrs. Parker." Miranda Wilson was now Miranda Parker. She had a new name, a new life, and a new husband, all acquired in less than 2 hours. After signing the marriage certificate and thanking Father Miguel and the Johnsons profusely, Daniel and Miranda rode away from the church as husband and wife. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "We should reach the ranch before full dark," Daniel said. "It's about an hour's ride from here." "What will your ranch hands think?" Miranda asked. "And Mrs. Chen?" "I imagine they'll be surprised," Daniel admitted, "but they're good people, they'll welcome you." They rode through increasingly pretty country, the land here more forgiving than around Cherry Creek. Miranda saw cattle grazing in the distance, their coats red and brown and black against the golden grass. They crossed another creek, this one larger, with clear water running over smooth stones. "That's Willow Creek," Daniel explained. "It runs through my property for about 5 miles, never goes dry even in the worst droughts. That's why I bought this land even though it was expensive." "How long have you owned the ranch?" Miranda asked. 7 years. "I started with nothing but a good horse and a lot of ambition. Worked cattle drives, saved every penny, and when I had enough, I bought this section of land. Built it up slowly, acquired more acreage, increased the herd. It's been hard work, but it's mine, free and clear." There was pride in his voice, and Miranda understood it. He had built something from nothing through sheer determination and hard work. It was admirable. As the sun touched the horizon, they crested a rise, and Daniel pointed ahead. "There. That's home." The Diamond P Ranch spread out in a valley below them, and Miranda caught her breath at the sight. The main house was a sprawling structure, built of timber and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Smoke rose from a chimney, promising warmth and food. Beyond the house stood a large barn, several corrals, and various outbuildings. Everything looked well maintained and prosperous. As they rode down toward the house, a woman emerged onto the porch, shading her eyes against the setting sun. She was small and compact, with gray-streaked black hair pulled back in a bun, wearing a simple dress and apron. "Mrs. Chen," Miranda presumed. 3 men emerged from the barn, clearly having heard the sound of hooves. They stopped short when they saw Daniel had a passenger. Daniel dismounted first, then helped Miranda down. She was stiff from the long ride and her legs nearly buckled. Daniel steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Gentlemen, Mrs. Chen, I'd like you to meet my wife, Miranda," Daniel announced, his voice carrying across the yard. The silence was deafening. 4 jaws dropped simultaneously. Mrs. Chen recovered first, bustling forward with a mixture of shock and delight on her face. "Wife. Mr. Daniel, when you leave this morning, you have no wife. Now you come back married. What kind of courtship is this?" "A very short one," Daniel admitted, a hint of humor in his voice. "It's a long story, Mrs. Chen. But yes, this is my wife, and I'd appreciate it if you'd help her get settled." The elderly woman turned to Miranda, looking her up and down with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Then, apparently satisfied with what she saw, she broke into a warm smile. "Welcome, Mrs. Parker. You look tired and dusty. Come, I will show you to your room, and there is water for washing. Dinner will be ready soon." One of the ranch hands, a young man of about 25 with sandy hair and a ready smile, stepped forward. "Congratulations, boss, madam." He tipped his hat to Miranda. "I'm Tommy Reid, That there is Frank Martinez and Jack Sullivan. The other two men, one Hispanic and one with red hair and freckles, both nodded their greetings, clearly too shocked to say much. "Thank you," Miranda said, finding her voice. "I'm pleased to meet you all." "Tommy, help me get Miranda's trunk," Daniel said. "The rest of you tend to Copper. He's had a long day." As the men scattered to their tasks, Mrs. Chen ushered Miranda into the house. The interior was comfortable if masculine, with sturdy furniture and minimal decoration. But it was clean and well kept, with rag rugs on the wooden floors and curtains at the windows. "This way," Mrs. Chen said, leading Miranda down a hallway. She opened a door to reveal a spacious bedroom with a large bed covered in a colorful quilt, a washstand with a pitcher and bowl, a wardrobe, and a window that looked out over the valley. "This is the master bedroom. You will share with Mr. Daniel, yes." Miranda hesitated, remembering Daniel's promise. "Actually, we discussed having separate rooms." Mrs. Chen's eyebrows rose and something knowing flickered in her expression. "I see. Well, there is another room across the hall. It is smaller but comfortable. I will prepare it for Mr. Daniel if that is what you wish." "Thank you," Miranda said gratefully. The older woman patted her arm. "You are tired and have had a difficult day, I think. Rest, wash, and come to the kitchen when you are ready. I will have food waiting." After Mrs. Chen left, Miranda sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the day's events. This morning she had woken in the boarding house, terrified of what the auction would bring. Now she was married, living on a beautiful ranch with her own room and people who seemed kind. It was too much to process. A soft knock came at the door. "Miranda, it's Daniel. Tommy and I have your trunk." "Come in," she called. Daniel and Tommy entered, setting the trunk at the foot of the bed. Tommy grinned at her. "Welcome to Diamond P, madam. I hope you'll be happy here." With that, he departed, leaving Daniel and Miranda alone. Daniel stood awkwardly, his hat in his hands. "I wanted to make sure you were comfortable. Mrs. Chen said you wanted separate rooms." "You said we could," Miranda reminded him gently. "I did, and I meant it," Daniel assured her. "I just wanted to clarify that I'll be right across the hall if you need anything. And Miranda, I know today was overwhelming and frightening. I want you to know that you're safe here. This is your home now, for as long as you want it to be." Miranda stood and crossed to him, looking up into his face. He was even more handsome in the lamplight, she realized, with strong features and eyes that held both strength and gentleness. "Thank you, Daniel, for everything. You saved me today in more ways than one." "You saved yourself," Daniel corrected. "You made a brave choice." "We both made brave choices," Miranda said. "And now we're married, which is still surreal." A smile tugged at Daniel's lips. "I've been a bachelor for 30 years. Now I'm a husband. That's going to take some getting used to." "You're 30, Miranda asked, "last month. Does that bother you?" "No," Miranda said honestly. "You're only 2 years older than me. That's hardly scandalous." An awkward silence fell. Finally, Daniel cleared his throat. "I should let you rest and freshen up. Dinner will be in about half an hour. Just follow the smell of Mrs. Chen's cooking. It's impossible to miss." After he left, Miranda opened her trunk and pulled out her other dress, a simple green cotton that was less worn than the blue one she wore. She poured water from the pitcher into the bowl and washed the dust of the road from her face and hands, feeling slightly more human. When she emerged and made her way to the kitchen, following the delicious smells of cooking food, she found a large, warm room with a cookstove, a long table, and shelves stocked with dishes and foodstuffs. Mrs. Chen was bustling about, and Daniel stood near the table, having changed into a fresh shirt. "Ah, Mrs. Parker, sit," Mrs. Chen commanded, gesturing to the table. "I have made beef stew, fresh bread, and apple pie. Mr. Daniel, you sit too. The men will eat in the bunkhouse tonight. I think you need time with your new wife, yes. Daniel looked faintly embarrassed but nodded. He held out a chair for Miranda and she sat, feeling strange and wonderful to have someone do such a simple courtesy for her. Mrs. Chen served them generous portions, and as Miranda took her first bite, she nearly moaned. The stew was rich and flavorful, the meat tender, the vegetables perfectly cooked. The bread was warm and crusty. It was the best meal she had eaten in months, possibly years. "This is incredible, Mrs. Chen," Miranda said sincerely. The older woman beamed. "You are too thin. I will feed you properly. In 2 weeks, you will have color in your cheeks again." As they ate, Daniel asked Miranda questions about her background, and she told him about her childhood in St. Louis, her mother's death, her father's wanderlust that had brought them west, his failed prospecting ventures, and finally his death. It felt good to talk about it, to share her story with someone who listened without judgment. In turn, Daniel told her about growing up on a small farm in Kansas, about leaving home at 18 to make his way, about the back-breaking work of cattle drives and the dream of owning his own land that had sustained him through the hardest times. He spoke of his sister Caroline with obvious pain but also with love, sharing memories that made her real to Miranda. "She would have liked you," Daniel said quietly. "Caroline always championed women who refused to be victims. She would have admired your strength today." "I didn't feel strong," Miranda admitted. "I felt terrified." "Being strong doesn't mean not being afraid," Daniel said. "It means acting despite the fear." After dinner, Mrs. Chen shooed them out of the kitchen, insisting she would clean up. Daniel walked Miranda back toward the bedrooms, the house quiet around them. "I usually ride out early to check on the herd and the men," Daniel said. "But you sleep as long as you need to. Mrs. Chen will have breakfast ready whenever you wake. Make yourself at home, Miranda. Explore the house, the grounds, do whatever you like." "Thank you," Miranda said. They stood in the hallway between their 2 rooms, an odd moment of intimacy despite the separate doors. "Happy birthday, Miranda," Daniel said softly. "I'm sorry it didn't start well, but I hope it ends better." Impulsively, Miranda rose on her toes and kissed his cheek. "It ends much better. Good night, husband." "Good night, wife," Daniel replied, a smile in his voice. Miranda entered her room and closed the door, leaning against it as she processed the extraordinary day. She was married. She had a home. She was safe. And perhaps most surprising of all, she felt a flutter of something warm and hopeful in her chest when she thought of the man sleeping across the hall. The days that followed fell into a pleasant rhythm. Miranda woke each morning to find Daniel already gone, out working the ranch. She would dress and make her way to the kitchen, where Mrs. Chen always had coffee ready and would cook breakfast while they chatted. The older woman had a dry wit and was full of stories about the territory and the people in it. "Mr. Daniel, he is good man," Mrs. Chen said one morning about a week after the wedding. "5 years I work for him, and always he treats me with respect. Pays fair wages, never raises his voice. When my husband die in the mine, Mr. Daniel, he pays for the burial, gives me this job. I have roof over my head, food to eat. He saves my life like he saves yours." "He seems to make a habit of saving people," Miranda observed, sipping her coffee. "He has good heart, but also much sadness. His sister, you know, that broke something in him. Before, the men say he would laugh more, smile more. After, he works too hard, never takes time for joy." Mrs. Chen fixed Miranda with a meaningful look. "Maybe now that changes, yes. Maybe a wife brings back the laughter." Miranda felt the weight of that expectation, but also the truth in it. She had noticed that while Daniel was unfailingly kind and courteous, there was a solemnity about him, as if he carried a burden he could not set down. During the days, Miranda helped Mrs. Chen with various tasks, learning the rhythms of ranch life. She discovered she enjoyed working in the vegetable garden, nurturing the tomatoes, beans, and squash that grew in neat rows. She collected eggs from the chickens and learned to make butter from cream. The work was hard but satisfying in a way her previous life had never been. The evenings were her favorite time. Daniel would return from his work, wash up, and they would share dinner, usually joined by Mrs. Chen. Afterward, the older woman would retire to her own small cottage behind the main house, and Daniel and Miranda would sit on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. They talked during these times, really talked, sharing thoughts and dreams and fears. Miranda learned that Daniel loved to read, that he had taught himself from books he bought whenever he could afford them. She learned that he wanted to improve his herd with better breeding stock, that he dreamed of making Diamond P one of the most respected ranches in the territory. Daniel learned that Miranda spoke English, French, and Spanish, having had a governess as a child. He learned that she loved music but had not sung in years, not since her mother died. He learned that she had always wanted to see the ocean but had never traveled beyond the middle of the country. "Maybe someday we could go to California," Daniel said one evening. "See the Pacific Ocean. It's supposed to be beautiful." "Maybe someday," Miranda agreed, thinking how strange and wonderful it was to make plans with this man, to imagine a future together. 2 weeks after their wedding, Miranda woke in the middle of the night to the sound of shouting. She threw on her robe and rushed into the hallway, nearly colliding with Daniel, who was already dressed and strapping on his gun belt. "What's happening?" she asked. "Someone's trying to steal cattle," Daniel said grimly. "Stay inside with Mrs. Chen. Lock the doors." Before she could protest, he was gone, running out into the night. Miranda hurried to Mrs. Chen's cottage and found the older woman already awake, a shotgun in her hands. "We wait, Mrs. Chen said calmly. "The men, they will handle it." But waiting was agony. Miranda paced the main house, peering out windows into the darkness, seeing nothing but hearing occasional shouts and the sound of gunfire that made her heart jump into her throat. What if Daniel was hurt? What if something happened to him? The thought terrified her in a way that revealed how much her feelings had grown. He was not just the man who had saved her. He was her husband, her friend, and increasingly someone she cared about deeply. It felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes before the sound of horses returning reached her ears. Miranda rushed to the door, throwing it open despite Mrs. Chen's protests, and relief flooded through her when she saw Daniel dismounting, apparently unhurt. "We caught them," he said, walking up the porch steps. "Just a couple of drifters trying their luck. We fired over their heads and they ran. Doubt they'll come back." "You're not hurt?" Miranda asked, her hands fluttering near him as if she wanted to touch him but was not sure if she should. Daniel caught her hands gently. "I'm fine. I'm sorry we woke you." "I don't care about being woken," Miranda said fiercely. "I care that you're safe." Something shifted in Daniel's expression, a softening, a warmth that had not been there before. "You were worried about me." "Of course I was worried," Miranda said. "You're my husband." "A husband you've known for 2 weeks," Daniel pointed out, but his tone was gentle, almost wondering. "Time doesn't matter," Miranda said. I care about you, Daniel, more than I expected to. More than I probably should, given the circumstances of our marriage." Daniel's hands tightened on hers. "Miranda, I need to tell you something. When I rode into Cherry Creek that day, I thought I was just stopping an injustice. I thought I was saving a stranger out of guilt and memory. But from the moment you took my hand on that platform, from the moment I looked into your eyes, something shifted. And every day since, every conversation, every shared meal, every evening on the porch, I've felt it growing." "Felt what growing?" Miranda whispered, though she thought she knew. "Love," Daniel said simply. I'm falling in love with you, Miranda. Maybe I have been from the start. I know it's fast. I know it's not what we agreed, but I can't help how I feel. Miranda's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears. I'm falling in love with you too. I didn't plan it, but somewhere between the auction and the wedding and all these quiet evenings, I stopped seeing you as my rescuer and started seeing you as my partner, my equal, my match. Daniel pulled her close, and this kiss was nothing like the chaste one at their wedding. This was deep and passionate and full of promise, a seal on the feelings they had confessed. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Come to my room," Miranda said softly. "Tonight, don't sleep across the hall, sleep beside me. Are you sure?" Daniel asked, his voice rough with desire but also with concern. "I don't want to rush you." "I'm sure," Miranda said. "We're married and I love you, and I don't want to spend another night alone when I could be with you." That night, their marriage became real in every sense. Daniel was gentle and patient, and Miranda discovered joy she had not known existed. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, she felt a peace she had not experienced since before her mother died. "I used to think my birthday was cursed," she murmured. "My mother died 3 days before my 16th birthday. My father became ill on my 27th birthday. I was auctioned on my 28th, but you turned it into something beautiful. You made it my wedding day instead." Daniel's arms tightened around her. "Every birthday from now on will be beautiful. I promise you that." The months that followed were the happiest of Miranda's life. As summer turned to fall and fall to winter, she and Daniel built a true marriage, one based on love and respect and partnership. She took over more of the ranch's bookkeeping, her education and facility with numbers proving invaluable. She helped Mrs. Chen with preserving food for winter. She learned to ride, and Daniel gave her a gentle mare named Daisy. In November, Daniel took her to Carson City, the territorial capital, for a weekend. They stayed in a hotel, ate at fancy restaurants, and he bought her 3 new dresses and a proper wedding ring to replace Mrs. Johnson's borrowed one, though Miranda kept the original on a chain around her neck, a reminder of where they had started. "I want to buy you the world," Daniel said as they walked through the town, her hand tucked in his arm. "You already gave me the world," Miranda replied. "You gave me a home, a purpose, and love. What more could I possibly need?" Christmas at the ranch was wonderful. They invited the ranch hands and Mrs. Chen to the main house for a feast. Miranda sang for the first time in years, her voice rusty but sweet, and Daniel looked at her with such love that she felt her heart might burst. In January, Miranda realized her monthly courses had not come. She was terrified and thrilled in equal measure. When she told Daniel, he picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy. "A baby," he kept saying. "We're having a baby." Mrs. Chen clucked over her like a mother hen, making sure she did not work too hard, preparing special foods to keep her healthy. The ranch hands treated her like spun glass, and Daniel was impossibly tender, his hand constantly seeking her still flat belly, his eyes full of wonder. "Boy or girl?" he asked one evening. "I don't know," Miranda said. "What do you hope for?" "Healthy," Daniel said immediately. "That's all I hope for. Healthy baby and healthy mother." But privately, Miranda hoped for a boy, a son with his father's blue eyes and strong character. A son who would grow up knowing his father's love, who would learn ranching and integrity and how to be a good man. Her pregnancy progressed smoothly through winter and into spring. Her belly swelled, and she felt the baby move, a flutter that became kicks and rolls. Daniel would put his hand on her stomach and grin every time the baby moved, as if he could not quite believe the miracle of it. In April, Vernon Sykes appeared at the ranch. Daniel was out checking fence lines, and Miranda was in the garden with Mrs. Chen when the saloon owner rode up on a sway-backed horse, looking even more dissolute than she remembered. Mrs. Chen immediately stepped in front of Miranda protectively. "What do you want, Sykes?" the older woman demanded. "I want to talk to Miss Wilson," Sykes said, his eyes on Miranda. "Or should I say Mrs. Parker?" "You have no business here," Mrs. Chen said. "Leave now or I will get the shotgun." "I just want to talk," Sykes said, holding up his hands. "That's all. 5 minutes of conversation." Miranda stepped forward, ignoring Mrs. Chen's protest. "Say what you came to say, then leave." Sykes's eyes dropped to her swollen belly and his lips twisted. "So the rancher knocked you up. How domestic. I came to offer you a business proposition." "I want nothing from you," Miranda said coldly. "Hear me out. The mine outside Cherry Creek has a new vein. It's paying out well. I'm opening a new saloon, a nicer place, and I need a manager. Someone educated, someone who can keep books and manage people. I'll pay well and you wouldn't have to do anything but manage." "No," Miranda said flatly. "I have a home, a husband, and a child on the way. I want nothing to do with you or your schemes." Sykes's expression darkened. "You think you're better than me now. You think being married to Parker changes what you are. You were sold at auction, same as a slave. Everyone in the territory knows it. And everyone in the territory knows my husband paid your extortionate debt and married me the same day," Miranda shot back. "They know he's a respected rancher and you're a bottom-feeding parasite. Now get off our land before I have you thrown off." "You'll regret this," Sykes snarled. "You think you're safe here, but nothing lasts forever." "Is that a threat?" a cold voice asked. Everyone turned to see Daniel riding up, Tommy and Frank flanking him. Daniel dismounted, and the look on his face was murderous. "Sykes, I told you in Cherry Creek that if you came near my wife, we'd have a problem. Looks like we have a problem." "I was just leaving," Sykes said, suddenly less confident. "Not yet." Daniel moved forward, and despite being unarmed, his presence was so commanding that Sykes actually backed up. "You rode onto my land, threatened my pregnant wife, and thought you could just ride away. I don't think so." "I didn't threaten anyone," Sykes blustered. "I heard you," Daniel said. "So did Mrs. Chen. Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn that sorry excuse for a horse around and ride away from here, and you're never going to come back. You're never going to speak to my wife, speak about my wife, or think about my wife. Because if you do, if I hear even a whisper of your name in connection with her, I will ride to Cherry Creek and shut down your saloon. I'll call in every favor I'm owed, talk to every authority I know, and I'll make sure you never do business in this territory again. Do you understand me?" Sykes glared but nodded. "I didn't hear you," Daniel said dangerously. "I understand," Sykes bit out. "Good. Now get out of my sight." Sykes rode away, whipping his horse unnecessarily. Daniel watched until he disappeared, then turned to Miranda, his expression transforming from fury to concern. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" "I'm fine," Miranda assured him, though she was shaking. "Mrs. Chen was here, and I was never in real danger, but I'm glad you came when you did." Daniel pulled her close, careful of her belly. "I won't let anyone threaten you or our child. Never." That evening, Daniel sent Tommy to Cherry Creek to spread the word about Sykes's visit and Daniel's response. It was important that people knew Daniel Parker protected what was his, and that there would be consequences for anyone who thought otherwise. "I hate that you have to deal with this," Miranda said as they sat on the porch. "I brought trouble to your door." "You brought joy to my door," Daniel corrected. "Sykes is a problem of his own making, and he won't bother us again. Men like that only act when they think they can get away with it. Now he knows he can't." In late May, as spring blossomed into early summer, Miranda's pains began. Mrs. Chen immediately took charge, sending Tommy for the doctor in the nearest town and the midwife from a neighboring ranch, while Frank and Jack kept Daniel out of the house because he was, according to Mrs. Chen, making everyone nervous with his pacing. The labor was long and difficult. Miranda had not expected such pain, such exhaustion. But every time she thought she could not go on, she remembered Daniel waiting outside, remembered the life they had built, remembered the baby who was fighting to be born, and she found new strength. Finally, as the sun set on the longest day of her life, a baby's cry split the air. The midwife held up a squalling, red-faced infant, and Miranda's eyes filled with tears. "A boy," the midwife announced. "A healthy boy." After the midwife cleaned the baby and made sure Miranda was stable, they let Daniel in. He moved to the bedside like a man in a dream, his eyes locked on the bundle in Miranda's arms. "Meet your son," Miranda said softly, pulling back the blanket so Daniel could see the tiny face, the impossibly small fingers, the dark hair that crowned the baby's head. Daniel reached out with a trembling hand and touched his son's cheek. "He's perfect. You're perfect." "God, Miranda, I've never seen anything so beautiful." "What should we name him?" Miranda asked. "I was thinking," Daniel said slowly, "if it was all right with you, we could call him Charles after your father, Charles Parker." Miranda burst into tears again, but they were happy tears. "That's perfect. Papa would have loved that." Baby Charles was the joy of the household. Even the crusty ranch hands turned to mush around him, and Mrs. Chen spoiled him shamelessly. Daniel was a devoted father, rising in the night to help with feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours just watching his son sleep. "I want him to grow up knowing he's loved," Daniel said one night as they lay in bed, Charles in a cradle beside them. "I want him to grow up free without the shadows that Caroline and I carried." "He will," Miranda promised. "We'll make sure of it." The years flowed by like water, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Charles grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's blue eyes and his mother's auburn hair, running through the ranch house and making everyone laugh. When he was 2, Miranda became pregnant again, and this time she delivered a daughter they named Grace Caroline, after Daniel's sister. Grace was a beautiful child, with dark hair and green eyes like her mother. She was quieter than Charles, but with a stubborn streak a mile wide. Daniel doted on her shamelessly, and Miranda often found father and daughter in serious conversation about things like why horses had 4 legs or where the sun went at night. The ranch prospered. Daniel's careful breeding program improved the herd, and Diamond P cattle became sought after throughout the territory. He bought more land, hired more men, built a new barn. Miranda managed the business side, her education and quick mind proving invaluable as they navigated contracts and deals. On their 5th anniversary, Daniel surprised her with a trip to California. They left the children with Mrs. Chen and the ranch hands and traveled west by train, a luxury Miranda had never experienced. In San Francisco, they stayed in a grand hotel and dined in fine restaurants. And on a perfect summer day, Daniel took her to the beach. Miranda stood at the edge of the Pacific Ocean, feeling the spray on her face, watching the waves roll endlessly toward the shore. Daniel's arms came around her from behind, and she leaned back against him. "You made it to the ocean," he said. "We made it to the ocean," Miranda corrected. "Everything good in my life we've done together." "Do you ever think about that day?" Daniel asked quietly. "The auction." "Sometimes," Miranda admitted, "but not with pain anymore. That day brought me to you. It brought me to this life. I wouldn't change it, even the hard parts, because they led me here." "I love you, Miranda Parker," Daniel said. "More today than yesterday, and I'll love you more tomorrow than today." "I love you too," Miranda replied. "My cowboy, my husband, my heart." They stood there, watching the sun set over the ocean, the sky painted in brilliant oranges and purples and reds. And Miranda thought about the terrified woman who had stood on an auction block 5 years ago, thinking her life was over. That woman could never have imagined this, could never have dreamed that the day she was sold would become the day she found everything she had ever wanted. When they returned to Diamond P, Miranda discovered she was pregnant again. This third pregnancy brought them twin boys, Jacob and James, who kept the entire household running ragged with their energy and mischief. The ranch house rang with laughter and noise, with children's voices and running feet. Daniel hired a teacher for the children, a young woman named Sarah who came 3 days a week to instruct Charles, Grace, and eventually the twins in reading, writing, and arithmetic. Miranda taught them music and languages, while Daniel taught them about ranching and animals and the land. On Charles's 10th birthday, Daniel gave him his first horse, a young gelding named Thunder. "A boy needs a horse," Daniel said, watching with obvious emotion as his son rode circles in the corral. "And a horse needs a boy to love him." Miranda stood beside her husband, her hand in his, watching their son laugh with pure joy. "You've given them such a good life," she said. "We've given them a good life," Daniel corrected, as he always did. "Everything I have, everything I am, I share with you." When Nevada became a state in 1864, the Parkers celebrated along with the rest of the territory. Though Cherry Creek continued to decline as the mines played out, Diamond P thrived. Daniel became known throughout the region as a fair dealer and an honest man. People sought his advice and valued his opinion. One winter day, when Miranda was 43 and Daniel was 45, they received word that Vernon Sykes had died, drunk and alone in a boarding house in California. Miranda felt nothing but pity for the man who had tried to sell her, who had lived a life of bitterness and greed and died with no one to mourn him. He had every opportunity to choose differently, Daniel said when she expressed her pity. He could have been kind instead of cruel, generous instead of grasping. We can pity him, but we don't need to feel guilty. His choices made his life, just as our choices made ours. Miranda thought about that, about the choices that had brought them here. Her choice to trust Daniel. His choice to save her. Their choice to build something real from the strangest of beginnings. Charles grew into a fine young man, tall like his father, with a good head for business and a natural way with cattle. When he was 22, he married a neighboring rancher's daughter, a sweet girl named Emma, and Daniel gifted them a section of land to start their own ranch. Grace, at 19, shocked everyone by announcing she wanted to study medicine. "There's a women's medical college back east," she said firmly, her green eyes daring anyone to argue. "I want to be a doctor." Daniel, who had always encouraged his children to follow their dreams, funded her education without hesitation. When Miranda worried about her daughter traveling so far alone, Grace laughed. "Mama, you stood on an auction block and married a stranger. I think I can handle medical school." The twins, at 17, were still deciding their paths, but both loved the ranch and showed every sign of staying to help run the expanding Diamond P operation. On Miranda's 50th birthday, Daniel threw her a party. Friends and neighbors came from miles around, filling the ranch house and spilling out onto the grounds. There was food and music and dancing, and as Miranda looked around at the life they had built, the family they had raised, the community they were part of, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. That evening, after everyone had left and the house was quiet, Daniel took her hand and led her outside to the porch where they had spent so many evenings over the years. 50 years old, Miranda mused. I never thought I'd make it to 50, especially not on that day 22 years ago. "22 years ago, I rode into Cherry Creek on business and rode out with a wife," Daniel said. "Best business I ever conducted," Miranda laughed. "Is that what you call it? Business?" "The most important transaction of my life," Daniel said, pulling her close. "I traded $300 and got everything I ever wanted in return." "Quite a bargain," Miranda teased. "The best," Daniel agreed. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Do you know what I remember most about that day?" "What?" "Your eyes. When you looked at me from that platform, you were terrified, but you were also fierce. You were beaten down, but you weren't broken. I saw strength in you, Miranda, and courage, and I knew that whatever happened, you would survive. I wanted to be part of that survival. I wanted to stand beside someone that strong." "I saw kindness in your eyes," Miranda said softly. "In a world that had shown me nothing but cruelty, you showed me kindness, and then you showed me love. You showed me what it meant to be partners, to build something together, to create a life worth living." They stood there, older now but no less in love, watching the stars come out over the mountains. The ranch was quiet around them, the cattle settled for the night, the horses drowsing in the barn, their children grown and making their own ways in the world. "What do you think happens next?" Miranda asked. "We're not young anymore. What does the future hold?" "More of this," Daniel said simply. "More mornings waking up beside you. More evenings watching the sunset. Grandchildren, I hope. Maybe we'll travel more, see more of the world. Maybe we'll just sit on this porch and grow old together. Whatever happens, as long as you're beside me, I'll be content." "I love you, Daniel Parker," Miranda said, the same words she had spoken countless times over the years, but no less true for their repetition. "You took the worst day of my life and made it the best. You took a woman being auctioned and made her a wife, a mother, a partner. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Daniel corrected, kissing her forehead. "And we're not done yet. We have years ahead of us, years to add to our story." And they did have years, good years. They watched Charles and Emma have children, making them grandparents to 3 beautiful grandchildren. They celebrated when Grace graduated from medical school and returned to Nevada to set up a practice. They saw the twins, Jacob and James, take over more of the ranch operations, allowing Daniel and Miranda to slow down and enjoy life at a gentler pace. On their 30th anniversary, their children threw them a grand celebration. The ranch house was filled with family and friends, with laughter and love. As Miranda danced with Daniel, his hair now gray and her face lined with age, she thought about the journey they had taken together. From an auction block to a wedding ceremony to this moment, spinning in the arms of the man she loved, surrounded by the life they had built. It had not always been easy. There had been lean years and hard seasons, illness and worry, the normal struggles of any life. But through it all, they had faced everything together, their love the foundation on which everything else was built. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked, noticing the tears in her eyes. "About how lucky I am," Miranda said. "About how a day that started with such fear and despair ended with such hope and love. About how you saved me." "We saved each other," Daniel said. "I was lost before you, Miranda. I was going through the motions of life but not really living. You brought me back. You gave me purpose and joy, and a reason to look forward instead of backward." As the party continued around them, as their children and grandchildren laughed and danced, as friends raised toasts to their long marriage, Daniel and Miranda held each other close. They had taken the worst thing that ever happened to her and transformed it into the best thing that ever happened to both of them. The years continued to pass, each one precious. They celebrated Miranda's 60th birthday with another party, though smaller this time, just family. The grandchildren, now numbering 5 with the births of Grace's twins and another son for Charles and Emma, climbed all over their grandparents, begging for stories. "Tell us about how you met," the oldest grandchild, a girl named Caroline after her great-aunt, demanded. Miranda and Daniel exchanged glances. They had told the children sanitized versions, but the grandchildren were old enough now to hear the truth. "It was Grandma's birthday," Daniel began. "She was in trouble and I helped her. And then you fell in love?" Caroline asked, a romantic even at 8 years old. "Eventually," Miranda said. "Sometimes the best love stories start in unexpected ways. Your grandfather saw me when I needed help, and he had the courage to step forward. And then we built something beautiful together." "That's not a very detailed story," Caroline complained. "When you're older, I'll tell you the whole story," Miranda promised. "But the important part is this. Sometimes life puts you in situations you never expected. Sometimes things happen that seem terrible at the time. But if you're brave, if you're willing to trust and take chances, those terrible things can become the best things that ever happened to you." As the children ran off to play, Grace, now a respected doctor at 45, sat beside her mother. "They don't need to know everything yet," she said quietly. "No," Miranda agreed. "But someday they should know. They should know that their grandmother was strong enough to survive the worst and their grandfather was good enough to help her. They should know that love can grow even in the harshest circumstances, and that family is what you build, not just what you're born into." Grace squeezed her mother's hand. "You taught me that. You and Papa both. You taught me that women can be strong, that we don't have to accept what the world tries to force on us. That's why I became a doctor, because you showed me what courage looks like." Miranda's eyes filled with tears. "And you've made us so proud, all of you have. You've taken the life we gave you and made something wonderful with it." When Miranda was 65, she became ill. It was nothing dramatic, just a gradual weakening, a fading. Grace examined her mother with professional skill and personal anguish, then delivered the diagnosis. Her heart was failing. "How long?" Daniel asked, his voice steady though his eyes were devastated. "Months," Grace said quietly. "Maybe a year if we're lucky. I'm sorry, Papa." "There's nothing I can do." Daniel nodded, accepting the news with the same quiet strength he had faced everything in life. When he and Miranda were alone, he held her close. "I'm not ready," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm not ready to lose you." "I know," Miranda said, her own tears falling. "I'm not ready to go. But we've had 35 years, Daniel. 35 years of love and life and joy. That's more than most people get." "It's not enough," Daniel said fiercely. "It will never be enough." But as the months passed, they made the most of the time they had. Daniel barely left her side. They sat on the porch and watched the sunsets. They looked through old photographs and told stories. They held their grandchildren and whispered advice. They laughed and cried and loved each other with the intensity of people who knew their time was limited. One evening, as spring turned to summer and wildflowers bloomed across the ranch, Miranda felt her strength fading. The family gathered around her bed, all her children and grandchildren, and she looked at each face with love. "I'm so proud of all of you," she said, her voice weak but clear. "You've made my life so rich, so full. Promise me you'll take care of each other. Promise me you'll remember that love is the most important thing. Everything else fades, but love endures." Through tears, they promised. When only Daniel remained, sitting beside the bed and holding her hand, Miranda looked at him with eyes that had seen so much. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for saving me, for loving me, for giving me this beautiful life." "Thank you," Daniel replied, his voice thick with emotion. "For trusting me, for building this life with me, for being my wife, my partner, my love. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Miranda Parker." "The auction," Miranda said, a faint smile on her lips. You turned my auction into a wedding day. You took my worst day and made it my best." "I'd do it again," Daniel said. "1,000 times over I'd do it again." Miranda's eyes drifted closed. "I love you, Cowboy. I love you, wife," Daniel replied. "Until we meet again." She passed peacefully in the night, surrounded by love, her hand in Daniel's. At 65, Miranda Parker left behind a legacy of strength and courage, a family that adored her, and a husband whose heart would always belong to the woman he had saved and who had saved him in return. Daniel lived for 5 more years, running the ranch with his sons, watching his grandchildren grow, telling stories about Miranda to anyone who would listen. On his 75th birthday, sitting on the porch where he and Miranda had spent so many evenings, he closed his eyes for an afternoon nap and did not wake up. The family buried him beside Miranda, on a hillside overlooking the Diamond P Ranch, under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The gravestone read, "Daniel Parker, beloved husband, father, and grandfather. He lived with honor and loved with his whole heart." Beside it, Miranda's stone read, "Miranda Parker, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She faced life with courage and filled it with love." Years later, young Caroline, now grown and married herself, brought her own daughter to the graves. "These were your great-great-grandparents," she said. "They had a love story for the ages." "Tell me," the little girl said. And Caroline told her about a woman auctioned on her birthday and a cowboy who made it her wedding day instead. She told her about courage and kindness, about love growing from the strangest circumstances, about a life built on trust and partnership and devotion. She told her about how sometimes the worst things lead to the best things and how love, real love, endures beyond death. "That's the most romantic story I ever heard," the little girl breathed. "It's a true story," Caroline said, "and it's your story too. You're part of their legacy, part of the love they built. Never forget that." The wind blew across the hillside, rustling the wildflowers that grew around the graves. And if you listened carefully, you might have heard something that sounded like laughter, like the echo of love that never truly ends, like a promise kept across the years. The Diamond P Ranch still stands today, run by the descendants of Daniel and Miranda Parker. And on one wall of the ranch house hangs a faded photograph of a young couple on their 30th anniversary, looking at each other with eyes full of love that time could never diminish. Their story, the story of a woman auctioned and a cowboy who saved her, of a terrible day transformed into a beautiful beginning, became legend in the family. It was told and retold, a reminder that love can bloom even in the darkest circumstances, that courage can change everything, and that sometimes the best things in life come from the places we least expect. Miranda and Daniel Parker lived and loved and built something that lasted far beyond their years. And somewhere, somehow, their love continues, as eternal as the mountains that overlook the Diamond P Ranch, as enduring as the legacy they left behind, as powerful as the choice they made on that hot August day in 1884 when she was auctioned, and he made it her wedding day instead.